I've weathered plenty of storms in my life, both the kind that rattles your windows and the kind that shatters your heart. But nothing prepared me for the moment I stood outside my daughter's door on Christmas Eve, gift bags in hand, and heard her laugh, "I hope he doesn't make it." She wasn't talking about the weather. She was talking about me, her father, the man who sold his business, drained his savings, and poured 15 years into her happiness. That night, in the freezing snow, I learned the truth about what I meant to her. And from that moment, I knew this Christmas would be the last time she ever took me for granted. Before we begin, I want to ask, where are you watching from and how old are you? Please subscribe to Family Betrayal Unmasked to hear more deep, unforgettable tales. I had driven through more than just snow that night. 10 hours of icy Michigan roads with my arthritic hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles burned. The storm was relentless, sheets of white swirling across my windshield wipers, straining to keep up. Every mile hurt, but the thought of seeing my daughter Ashley made it bearable. She always said Christmas wasn't Christmas without family. I believed her. Her house came into view like a postcard, red and gold lights draped perfectly along the porch. The same lights I'd helped her hang 3 years ago when Howard's bad back kept him from the ladder. The windows glowed warm against the December night, promising comfort and laughter. My heart lifted. Maybe the sacrifices, the checks, the last-minute rescues had meant something after all. I parked in the driveway, careful not to block their garage, and grabbed the heavy gift bags from the back seat. Scarves I'd spent hours choosing for Ashley, art books for Howard that cost more than most people's rent. I wanted them to feel how much they mattered to me. My boots crunched on the icy walkway as I climbed the porch steps. Then I heard it. Ashley's voice, light and casual, but with an edge that sliced right through me. "I honestly hope he doesn't make it." At first I thought maybe she was talking about a neighbor or an acquaintance. But then Howard's deeper voice followed, amused, not alarmed. "Come on, that's your dad." I know. But look at this weather. Maybe the roads will be too bad. We could have one Christmas without him hovering, asking if we need money, bringing those awful sugar cookies. Just us. No guilt trips about family togetherness. Their laughter rolled out through the thin door, warm and easy, completely unaware I was standing just feet away in the freezing wind. My hand froze on the doorknob. For 15 years since the divorce I had built my life around. Ashley sold my company, funded her education, paid for her wedding, covered car repairs, the down payment on their home. I had driven through snowstorms before canceled my own trips, ignored my own health, all to make sure she never had to face hardship. And here she was, laughing about how nice it would be if I didn't show up. The sting of cold in my chest had nothing to do with the weather. I stepped back slowly, careful not to let the snow crunch too loudly. The house that moments ago felt like a beacon now looked like a stranger's home. I walked to my car, the exhaust still curling into the dark, and placed the gift bags gently on the back seat. My knees protested as I lowered myself into the driver's seat, but I barely felt it. I started the engine and drove away without knocking, without calling, without letting them know I'd been there. In the rearview mirror, the Christmas lights blurred into the darkness until they disappeared completely. Tell me, if you stood outside a loved one's door and heard them say they wished you wouldn't come, would you walk in anyway? Or walk away? I didn't head home right away. The highway stretched ahead of me like an endless ribbon of dark ice flurries darting through my headlights, like they had somewhere to be. I kept the car steady, avoiding the main route in favor of back roads. I needed the extra miles to think. Or maybe I just wasn't ready to sit alone in my quiet house surrounded by the illusion that my daughter still wanted me in her life. For years, I told myself that family was worth any sacrifice, that selling my business, Green Industries, the work of my lifetime, wasn't just an act of love, it was the right thing to do. Every check I wrote, every bill I covered, every emergency I bailed them out of it, all felt like my duty. But as the snow whipped past my windshield, the truth began to settle in, heavier than the drifts on the roadside. I wasn't family to them. I was a resource, a wallet with a heartbeat. I pulled into my driveway 2 hours later, the Christmas lights I'd strung along the gutters 2 weeks earlier still twinkling through the snowfall. They looked different now, less like holiday cheer and more like a reminder of my own foolishness. I didn't bother unloading the gifts. They could stay in the back seat until I figured out what to do with them. Inside the house felt colder than the night air. I hung my coat in the closet, the weight of the wet wool dragging my arm down. My study was exactly as I'd left it. Shelves lined with framed photos of business milestones, awards, contracts, the evidence of the man I used to be. I sat at my desk and opened the file cabinet, pulling out folders I hadn't touched in years. Bank statements, insurance policies, my will. All of them pointed in one direction toward Ashley. She was my sole beneficiary. If anything happened to me, she and Howard would inherit everything: the house, my investments, my retirement accounts. The same people who wished I wouldn't survive the drive to see them on Christmas Eve. I started making a list. Down the left column, every major expense I'd covered for Ashley over the years. College tuition, $20,000, wedding, $40,000, down payment on the house, $75,000, car repairs, credit card bills, grocery money, too many entries to count. On the right, I wrote the totals. The number kept climbing until it sat just under $300. I leaned back in my chair, staring at it. That was more than some people earned in a lifetime. I didn't feel rage. I didn't even feel grief. What I felt was clarity. For the first time in years, my mind shifted into the same mode I'd relied on in business: strategic, calculating, detached. This wasn't about emotion anymore. It was about control. I took out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for: Richard Morrison, my estate attorney. I didn't press call, not yet. But just seeing his name there glowing on the screen felt like the first step towards something I hadn't had in a long time: leverage. Tell me if you discovered someone you'd sacrificed everything for, secretly wished you'd never shown up. Would you confront them? Or quietly start planning? That night I didn't sleep much. The wind howled against the siding, rattling the window panes, but it was nothing compared to the noise in my head. Every scene replayed in vivid detail: the sound of Ashley's laugh, the casual cruelty in her voice, the way Howard joined in without hesitation. It wasn't just what they said. It was how natural it sounded, like it wasn't the first time they'd talked about me that way. By dawn, I had my answer. Confronting them would be pointless. Words wouldn't change who they were. And besides, I'd spent too many years letting emotion dictate my actions. This time, I would be deliberate. The first step was to sever the lifeline they didn't even realize they'd come to depend on. For 15 years, I had been their silent safety net: automatic transfers every month, covering everything from groceries to Howard's overpriced art supplies. They never asked if I could afford it. They never offered to pay me back. It was just assumed, like the sunrise. I opened my laptop and logged into my online banking. The numbers stared back at me, a stark reminder of just how much I'd given them. I canceled every automatic transfer and removed my name from our joint checking account. It felt clean, final, like cutting a rope that had been around my neck for years. Next came the insurance policies. My life insurance alone was worth $2 million, all earmarked for Ashley. I flipped through the paperwork, my eyes scanning the familiar name over and over. She was everywhere: beneficiary on my retirement accounts, my brokerage accounts, even my savings certificates. If I died tomorrow, the woman who hoped I wouldn't survive a snowstorm would live very comfortably. That thought alone was enough to push me to pick up my phone. I called Richard Morrison's office and left a message. "Richard, it's Ernest. I need to schedule a meeting right after the holidays. Big changes to my will. Call me as soon as you're in." My voice was calm, steady, businesslike. I didn't owe anyone an explanation, least of all Ashley. With the legal and financial wheels starting to turn, I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat back in my chair. This wasn't about revenge for the sake of hurting them. It was about recalibrating the balance. For too long, they had enjoyed the benefits of my sacrifices without any of the responsibility. That ended now. I imagined Ashley checking her bank account next week, confusion turning to frustration, Howard demanding answers. I could almost hear the phone ringing, her voice starting with fake concern, then slipping into irritation. I wouldn't answer. Not yet. The beauty of a well-executed plan is in the timing, and mine was just beginning. As the snow outside began to ease, a rare patch of blue sky appeared. For the first time in years, I felt the same clarity I used to have in the boardroom before closing a deal. Only this time, the deal was my life, and I intended to reclaim every part of it. Tell me, if you had the chance to quietly rewrite the rules in a relationship where you'd been taken for granted, would you take it? Christmas morning was unusually quiet. No early call from Ashley asking what time I'd be over. No text with heart emojis and a half-hearted "love you, Dad." Just the soft tick of the clock in my study and the hum of the furnace. It suited me fine. I didn't want noise today, I wanted space to think. The folder of documents from last night was still spread across my desk. Bank statements, policy forms, and my will sat in neat stacks. I ran my fingers over the pages like a craftsman inspecting his tools before starting a job. This wasn't an impulsive move. It was a restructuring my restructuring. At 10:17 a.m., the phone rang. Ashley's smiling face from last year's Christmas dinner popped up on the screen. I let it go 3 rings before answering, just long enough to plant a seed of worry. "Dad, we were so worried when you didn't show up last night. Are you okay?" I let a beat pass, then sighed, adding just the right tremor to my voice. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I should have called sooner, but I had an accident." There was a sharp inhale on her end. An accident? What happened? Her concern sounded rehearsed, like she was reading lines from a play she didn't want to be in. Ice on Miller Road. The curve by the old church, you know the one. Slid right into the guardrail. They kept me overnight for observation. Mild concussion, but I'm fine now. She gasped again, but I noticed she didn't ask if I needed help or if she should come over. Instead, Howard's voice chimed in from the background. "Is your car total drivable but the front end's banged up?" I said, keeping my tone casual. Ashley jumped back in. "Well, the important thing is you're safe. Do you need anything?" "Food, maybe." No. Just tired. I think I'll rest today. Maybe we can reschedule Christmas dinner for next week." There was a pause, 3 seconds too long. "Of course, Dad. Your health is the most important thing," she said, relief slipping through her words like water through a sieve. When I hung up, I smiled. The fake accident had done its job. It gave them a plausible reason for my absence and set the stage for what came next. They were off guard, unprepared for the real shift that was already in motion. I pulled out a yellow notepad and jotted down every detail of the call, their exact words, the tone changes, the questions they didn't ask. I wanted a record, a ledger just like in business of who they were when it counted. The beauty of silence is that it doesn't just keep your secrets, it forces others to reveal theirs. And by keeping mine, I was giving Ashley and Howard all the rope they needed to show me exactly how much or how little I meant to them. Tell me, have you ever used silence, not words, to see someone's true colors? The days between Christmas and New Year's always seemed to move slowly, but that year they crawled. It gave me time to sharpen my thoughts into a plan, and my plan into action. Every move had to be clean, precise, impossible to trace. I wasn't out to make a scene. I was out to make an impact. On the morning of December 29th, I drove into town. The roads were still lined with dirty snow salt stains painting the edges like tired brushstrokes. I parked in front of the First National Bank, the same one where I'd opened Ashley's first savings account when she was 10, and walked inside. Janet, my personal banker for over a decade, greeted me with the warmth she always had. "Morning, Mr. Green. How can I help you today? I need to close the joint checking account with my daughter," I said, laying the paperwork on her desk, "and I'd like to cancel all automatic transfers to her account." Her pen paused mid-air. "Is everything all right? Just updating my affairs after some recent health concerns," I replied smoothly. "Want to make sure my assets go where they'll be most appreciated." It was a lie, but a useful one. Within 20 minutes, the account was closed, the transfers canceled. It felt almost anticlimactic, like cutting a string and watching a balloon drift away, knowing it won't come back. From there, I went straight to my insurance office. The receptionist handed me the beneficiary change forms, and I filled them out right there in the lobby. My pen didn't hesitate when I crossed out Ashley Green Wilson and replaced it with Great Lakes Animal Welfare Foundation. By the time I left, the air felt lighter in my lungs. This was the first real cut, and I knew it would land hard once they discovered it. The first ripple came sooner than I expected. On January the 2nd, my phone lit up with Ashley's name. I let it go to voicemail. "Dad, my card was declined at the store today. I called the bank, but they said the account is closed. There must be some mistake. Can you call me back? Howard's getting really frustrated, and we need to buy groceries." I didn't return the call. By that evening, there were 3 more messages, each one more frantic than the last. Howard's voice could be heard in the background, sharp and accusing, blaming her for setting me off. It was almost poetic watching their comfortable life collapse in slow motion. For years, they'd relied on the quiet certainty that I'd always step in to fix things. Now they were learning what life looked like without a safety net. In my study, I sat back in my chair, hands folded, listening to Ashley's voicemails like they were quarterly reports. The language of desperation is universal and unmistakable. This was just the beginning. The first cut always is. Tell me, if you were pulling the plug on years of financial support, would you give a warning? Or let the silence speak for itself? The first Saturday of January dawned gray and brittle, the kind of morning when even the air felt unwilling to move. I sat at my kitchen table with a mug of coffee, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the faint crackle of the fireplace. My phone was face down beside me, but I didn't need to look at it to know what was waiting. Ashley's voice, Howard's anger, more pleas for help. I let them pile up. By mid-afternoon, the voicemail count was in double digits. Curiosity got the better of me, so I poured another cup of coffee and pressed play. "Dad, my card got declined again. We had to put groceries back. The bank says they can't tell me anything because of privacy rules. Can you please call me?" The next message came minutes later. Howard's tone tight with irritation. "Ernest, whatever's going on, you need to fix it. Rent's due next week, and we can't pay it without that transfer." I listened to each one, my expression neutral. In business, you learn that people reveal themselves under pressure. Some adapt, some crumble, some lash out at the very hand that used to feed them. Ashley and Howard were already showing their colors. It had been less than a week without my financial support, and they were unraveling. but I knew money troubles alone wouldn't be enough to teach them what they needed to learn. No, I wanted the lesson to settle in deeper past their wallets into their reputation, their sense of stability. Howard was the weak link. I'd seen him at the Detroit farmers market, pockets stuffed with cash from his art sales, not a receipt in sight. I knew exactly how much he wasn't reporting to the IRS, 15 to 20,000 a year, easy. I'd kept quiet about it before because Ashley insisted he's just trying to get by. Now I saw it for what it was, leverage. The next morning, I drove to the public library. No logins, no tracking, just anonymous computers and a steady hum of fluorescent lights. It didn't take long to find the IRS whistleblower page. I filled out the form, carefully giving dates, locations, even the booth numbers where Howard had sold his paintings. Estimated unreported income, I put $18,000, conservative enough to be credible. I hit submit. By the time I stepped back out into the cold, I felt the same quiet satisfaction I used to get after closing a deal no one saw coming. This wasn't about petty revenge. It was about introducing consequences to people who thought they'd never have to face them. Back home, I let the hours pass. I didn't call, didn't text. And sure enough, the calls kept coming. Ashley's voice shifted from confused to anxious, to something closer to panic. Howard's grew sharper, more desperate. I sat back in my chair, the fire casting long shadows across the room, and thought, this is only phase 1. The real storm hasn't even started yet. Tell me, if you knew someone was breaking the rules for years, would you expose them the moment they crossed you? It didn't take long for the cracks to widen. By the end of that week, Ashley had left me 13 voicemails and sent 6 text messages, all unanswered. At first, they were full of that syrupy concern she used when she wanted something: soft voice, careful phrasing, like we were still on good terms. But by Friday, the tone had shifted. Dad, I don't know what's going on, but the bank says the account was closed at your request. If this is some kind of misunderstanding, we need to fix it now. Howard's furious, and the landlord's already asking about rent. The next message came just 2 hours later. Howard's voice tight with barely controlled anger. Ernest, you can't just pull the rug out from under us like this. We've got bills, responsibilities. You know what happens if we can't pay rent. This isn't how family treats each other. I leaned back in my chair, listening to his words over the low crackle of the fire. The irony was almost too rich. They were lecturing me about family just days after wishing I wouldn't make it through a snowstorm to spend Christmas with them. Then came the call that told me my IRS submission had found its target, even if they didn't know it yet. Ashley's voice was thinner this time, rushed. Dad, something's wrong. The IRS sent a letter to Howard saying they want to audit his taxes. They're asking questions about cash income from his art sales. How could they possibly know? And now the credit card company's calling, saying our account is under review. Please just tell me if you know anything about this. I didn't respond. Instead, I picked up a pen and wrote her words in my notebook, part of the running record I'd been keeping since Christmas Eve. Every detail mattered. Every pause, every shift in tone, every time they revealed just how dependent they'd been on me, without even realizing it. By Saturday afternoon, the panic had spread to their neighbors. That part wasn't my doing, at least not directly. News travels fast in communities like theirs. All it takes is a couple of missed rent payments, a repo truck in the driveway, or the wrong envelope sticking out of the mailbox. People start whispering, and I knew exactly how to feed those whispers. That evening, I created a new email account, anonymous, with just enough personal detail to sound like it came from someone nearby. Then I sent a short, polite message to the manager of the salon where Ashley worked. I'm concerned about Ashley. She seems distracted lately, and there are rumors about some serious financial trouble at home. Just thought you should know. No accusations, no threats, just a nudge. enough to plant a seed. I closed my laptop, poured myself a glass of whiskey, and sat by the window watching the snow fall. It wouldn't be long now before that seed started to grow. And when it did, Ashley and Howard would feel the kind of pressure that no amount of borrowed money could relieve. Tell me, do you think reputations crumble faster from big scandals or from quiet whispers? By the following Wednesday, the first real signs of social erosion had begun. Ashley's voicemail that morning carried a sharp edge she tried to hide. "Dad, I don't know what's happening, but 3 clients canceled their appointments today. Linda, my manager, asked if I was going through something personal. I told her no, but she kept looking at me like she didn't believe me. Have you heard anything?" I smiled faintly. Of course I had heard something. I'd started it. In a community like theirs, the smallest rumor was enough to ripple outward. The salon wasn't just Ashley's workplace, it was her social hub, the place where she collected validation in the form of casual gossip and compliments. Once that well began to dry, the rest of her network would follow. The next step was to aim closer to home. That evening, I logged into the neighborhood's private Facebook group under another freshly minted account, Concerned Maple Street Neighbor. I posted something short and seemingly harmless. "Has anyone else noticed all the official mail piling up at the Wilsons' house, hoping everything's okay over there? Would be a shame if property values were affected." It was bait, pure and simple. And it didn't take long for the first bites to come in. Neighbors chimed in with stories how Howard's car had been repossessed last month, how they'd heard raised voices late at night, how Ashley had been avoiding eye contact at the grocery store. By Friday, I drove slowly down their street just to see the results. Howard's truck was parked out front, but I saw no sign of him. Ashley came out to get the mail, but when Mrs. Henderson from next door spotted her, she turned sharply and went back inside without a word. The shift was beginning. The following day brought a new kind of voicemail from Ashley, not angry, not pleading, but unsteady. "Dad, something's going on. Neighbors aren't talking to me. People at the market are acting strange. Even the mailman won't look me in the eye. It's like everyone knows something I don't. Please, if you know what's happening, I need you to tell me." But I didn't tell her. I wanted her to sit in it, to feel the isolation build layer by layer until she understood that money was just one piece of the foundation she'd been standing on. And once that piece crumbled, the rest could go with it. Howard was feeling it too. I could hear him in the background of the next message, his voice low but dripping with suspicion. "This isn't random. Someone's doing this to us." Ashley tried to brush him off in the recording, but her voice trembled. The beautiful thing about social pressure is that it rarely looks coordinated from the outside. It feels natural, organic, like a tide pulling you under before you even realize you're in the water. I poured myself another coffee, leaning back in my chair as her words replayed in my head. The cracks were spreading faster than I'd imagined. "Tell me, have you ever seen someone's world collapse without a single direct confrontation?" It was only a matter of time before Ashley's professional life took the same nosedive as her social one. The salon was a business built on trust, familiarity, and perception. Once perception cracked, the rest was inevitable. Her call came on a Thursday evening right as I was finishing dinner. I didn't answer, but the voicemail played like a scene from a slow-motion car wreck. "Dad, I lost my job today. Linda said the salon's reputation was being affected by my personal circumstances. She said clients were expressing concerns." I tried to argue, but it was clear she'd already made up her mind. I don't understand how everything's falling apart at once. I could have told her exactly how, but where's the lesson in that? From the start, this wasn't about quick payback, it was about erosion. You don't need an earthquake to destroy a building. Sometimes steady water will do the job just fine, carving away until the structure gives way under its own weight. The beauty of it all was that no one thought of me as the source. To the outside world, I was just the retired father who'd had a small accident over the holidays and was keeping to himself. Meanwhile, Ashley's support systems were vanishing one after another. 2 days later, she called again, this time with Howard in the background. His voice was full of accusation. "Ernest, you think you're clever. You think we don't see the timing here. Everything started after Christmas. After your so-called accident. Nobody else knew about my art sales. Nobody else had access to our financial info. You're doing this." Ashley's voice overlapped his, still clinging to a shred of denial. "Howard, that's crazy." Dad wouldn't, but she didn't sound certain anymore. I listened to the message twice. They were starting to connect the dots, but connecting them and proving anything were two different things. This was still my game, my board, my pieces. By the end of that week, the neighborhood whispers had become open avoidance. A local Business Watch email went out, another concerned citizen warning about financial instability affecting certain residents. No names, of course. None needed. On Saturday, I drove past their house again. Howard's truck was gone. Through the blinds, I saw Ashley moving boxes, small ones, the kind you pack when you're not ready to admit you're leaving, but know you should be ready. That evening, her voicemail came in late. She sounded tired, defeated. "Dad, Howard's talking about leaving town. Says Detroit's poisoned for him now. He blames me for everything, but I'm starting to think he's right about one thing: someone's targeting us. I don't know if it's you, but if it is, please stop. I can't take any more." I sat there in my study, letting the words hang in the air. This wasn't the end. Not yet. She was finally feeling the squeeze, but I still had one last turn of the screw before the lesson would be complete. Tell me if you knew one final move could make the lesson permanent. Would you take it? The first two phases, cutting the financial lifeline and dismantling their social standing, had done their work. But to make the lesson permanent, I needed to take away something they truly feared: losing their home. Ashley's rental wasn't in her name alone. I had co-signed the lease when they moved in, mostly because the landlord wouldn't take Howard's sporadic art income as reliable. I'd even convinced myself it was an act of generosity, giving them a stable place to live. In hindsight, it had been just another rope they used to tether me to their needs. On a crisp Tuesday morning, I made one short, polite call to the landlord. I didn't even have to explain much, just mention the missed payments, the credit issues, and my decision to remove myself as guarantor. Landlords don't need drama. They need rent. By Thursday, the envelope arrived at their door, a formal notice to vacate in 30 days. I saw it happen from my kitchen window. Ashley trudged to the mailbox in her worn winter coat, her shoulders hunched like the weight of the world was pressing her down. She pulled out the letter, ripped it open right there in the driveway, and froze. Even from 50 yards away, I saw her face crumble. The call came 2 hours later. "Dad." Her voice was raw, like she'd been crying. "We got an eviction notice. 30 days. Please help us. I know you're angry, but we can't lose our home. Just co-sign for a smaller apartment. I'll pay you back every cent. I promise." It was almost touching, this sudden transformation of years of handouts into a debt she swore she'd repay. But her promises were hollow. She didn't know that the credit damage I'd orchestrated meant no landlord in the city would approve her application, co-signer or not. The next day, Howard called, his tone stripped of the faux authority he'd tried to use before. "Ernest, we'll do whatever you want. You want us to crawl. Fine, we're crawling. Just help us find a place to live. I let it go to voicemail. By the following week, they'd looked at a dozen places, every one of them out of reach. In desperation, they settled for a cramped studio above a laundromat, the kind of place that reeked of detergent and damp concrete. Even then, Ashley's voice on my voicemail sounded strained. "Dad, we're moving tomorrow. Howard's not taking it well. He says this place is beneath us, but it's all we can afford. Please. I just wish things were different. Things were different from the world they'd known, where my support was endless and unconditional. Now they were living in the world they'd built for themselves, brick by careless brick. I sat back in my chair that night, the eviction notice playing over in my mind, not as a cruel act, but as the final wedge that would separate them from the life they thought they deserved. Phase 3 was complete. The only question now was how long they'd survive in this new reality. Tell me, do you believe people only change when they lose everything? It didn't take long for the reality of their new home to set in. A week after moving into the studio above the laundromat, Ashley left me a voicemail that didn't sound like the woman I'd known for years. Her voice was flat-tired, like the words were too heavy to lift. "Dad, the place smells like mold. The heat barely works. And the people downstairs, they fight all night. I can't sleep. Howard's miserable. I could almost see it. Howard pacing in that cramped room, his easel shoved into a corner, muttering about how this wasn't the life he signed up for. For years, he'd lived like a barnacle, clinging to my financial generosity through Ashley. Now the ship had sailed, and he was stuck in shallow water. The following week, her tone changed again. Howard left. Just 2 words before she stopped talking altogether, like saying it out loud, made it real. I listened to the silence on the recording, the faint background hum of dryers downstairs. Then she spoke again, softer now. He said he can't take living like this, that being around me is destroying his life. He went to Cleveland to stay with his brother. I think he's gone for good. The truth was, Howard leaving didn't surprise me. He was never built for struggle. The moment the perks vanished, so did he. But for Ashley, it was a different story. Howard's departure didn't just leave her alone, it left her without the illusion that someone was in her corner. That week, she started calling daily, not pleading for money anymore, not exactly. Instead, she sounded lost. "Dad, I'm trying. I'm looking for another job. The grocery store might hire me full-time. It's not much, but at least it's steady. I don't know how to start over." Part of me wanted to tell her she should have thought about starting over before she laughed about hoping I wouldn't survive the drive to see her on Christmas Eve. But I didn't. I let the silence do the talking. Every time she called, I wrote down her words in my notebook. Each page was a ledger of what she'd lost and what she'd learned. Though I doubted she even knew she was learning. I didn't rejoice in her misery, but I wasn't going to rescue her from it either. Growth only happens when the safety net is gone. One night, as the snow piled up outside my window, I sat in my study, listening to her latest message. She was crying quietly this time, the sound of someone too exhausted to hide it. "Dad, I need to know if there's any way back. I'm not asking for everything to go back to how it was. Just tell me what I have to do." It was tempting to answer, but I knew too soon, and she'd see it as an escape, not a transformation. She had more falling to do before she could climb. Tell me, would you step in to help at this point? Or keep letting the lessons sink in? It was a Thursday afternoon when I saw her walking up my driveway. The February wind whipped her hair into her face, but she didn't bother to push it back. She looked smaller somehow, not in height, but in presence. The Ashley I'd once known walked into a room expecting to be the center of it. This Ashley looked like she was hoping no one noticed her at all. I opened the door before she could knock. "Dad," she said, her voice little more than a breath. "Ashley," I replied evenly. "What brings you here?" She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, glancing around as if my living room had become a foreign place. Her coat was frayed at the cuffs, and the scarf around her neck wasn't one of the expensive ones I'd bought her over the years. "I need to ask you something." She began setting her purse down on the coffee table. "And I need you to be honest." I stayed standing while she sank into the couch, her posture more defensive than relaxed. "Are you ever going to forgive me?" she asked. "Because if the answer is no, I need to know. I can't keep hoping that someday you'll decide I've been punished enough." Her question was sharper than I expected, and for a moment I considered giving her the simple truth. But simple truths are rarely the ones that change people. "Forgiveness," I said slowly, "isn't something you wait for, it's something you earn." Her shoulders slumped. "Then tell me how. Tell me what I need to do, and I'll do it." I studied her face. There were dark circles under her eyes, the kind that come from more than just lost sleep. Her lips trembled when she wasn't speaking, and her hands fidgeted with the strap of her purse. "That's something you'll have to figure out yourself," I told her. She looked at me for a long moment, as if searching for some hidden softness in my expression. When she didn't find it, she stood. "Okay," she whispered. "I guess I'll go then." I didn't walk her to the door. I listened to the soft click of it closing, followed by the crunch of her boots on the snow as she made her way back down the driveway. For the rest of the evening, I thought about her question. Part of me wondered if I was being too harsh. But then I remembered Christmas Eve, the sound of her laughter, the words that had frozen me in place before I'd even knocked on her door. Some things once said can't be taken back. And if she was going to rebuild herself into someone worth forgiving, it wouldn't be because I handed her the blueprint, it would be because she learned to draft one herself. Tell me, if someone asked you exactly what to do to earn forgiveness, would you tell them, or make them discover it on their own? A few weeks passed after Ashley's visit. Her calls became less frequent, and when they did come, they were shorter, more deliberate, like she was rationing her words, the same way she probably rationed her groceries. I thought maybe she was starting to fade into her new life. Then one cold Tuesday morning, I saw her walking up the driveway again. She looked different this time. Not better, just different. Thinner. Her hair pulled back loosely, no makeup. Her cheeks hollow from a winter diet of stress and cheap meals. "I need to talk to you," she said as soon as I opened the door. There was no hesitation. She walked past me into the living room like she'd been rehearsing this moment. "I know I've been a terrible daughter." She began, her voice steady but low. "Selfish, ungrateful, all of it. But I'm begging you, please give me another chance. I want to make things right." I sat across from her, letting her words hang in the air. It would have been easy to nod, to let her believe remorse alone was enough. But this wasn't about an apology. It was about truth. "Do you remember Christmas Eve?" I asked. She nodded quickly. "Of course. You called and said you'd been in an accident." "Before that," I said evenly. "Do you remember what you and Howard were talking about before I called?" Her eyes flickered. I don't remember exactly." I reached for my phone, unlocked it, and scrolled to a file labeled December 24th. Without another word, I set it on the coffee table between us and pressed play. Her voice filled the room, clear and unmistakable. "I honestly hope he doesn't make it." Her face went pale instantly. Howard's voice followed. "Come on, that's your dad." I know, but look at this weather. Maybe the roads will be too bad." We could have one Christmas without him hovering, asking if we need money, bringing those awful sugar cookies. Just us. No guilt trips about family togetherness. Then came the laughter, hers, and Howard's, warm and cruel all at once. I stopped the recording. Ashley stared at the phone like it might burn her. You were there. You heard that. Every word I said. Her voice cracked. Dad, you don't understand. I understand perfectly, I cut in. I understood that night. And I've understood every day since. That conversation told me exactly what I mean to you. And that's why everything that's happened since then happened. Her hands were shaking now. Please, I was tired, stressed. It didn't mean anything. It meant enough, I replied. The tears came then, messy, uncontrolled. But I didn't move toward her, didn't offer comfort. Some truths can't be softened. When she left that day, she didn't look back, and I knew the sound of her own voice would follow her far longer than the memory of my silence. Tell me if you had the chance to make someone hear the exact moment they betrayed you. Would you press play? 6 months slipped by after the day I played Ashley that recording. She didn't come by again. The calls stopped. The messages stopped. At first the silence was strange, like standing in a house after a storm has passed, unsure if the quiet is safety or just the eye. But I got used to it. I filled my days differently. The Great Lakes Animal Welfare Foundation became more than just a line in my will. It became my second home. 3 mornings a week I drove to the shelter, fed the dogs refilled water bowls, and learned their quirks. Dogs don't care if you're rich or broke, if you've made mistakes or been betrayed. They just care that you show up. One Tuesday morning, I found an envelope in my mailbox, addressed in handwriting I knew instantly. Ashley's. My first instinct was to toss it in the desk drawer unread. But something about the steady, deliberate penmanship made me open it. Dear Dad, it began. I don't expect you to write back. I'm not asking for money, forgiveness, or a second chance. I just wanted you to know how this year has changed me. She wrote about working full-time at a grocery store, long hours, tough customers, but a paycheck she'd earned herself. She'd moved into a small apartment that she paid for without help. Howard hadn't come back, and she was fine with that. I needed to learn who I am without leaning on someone else, she said. She even mentioned my will. I know Robert Morrison told you he explained the changes. I know now that when I thought I had a safety net, I didn't. You were teaching me to stand on my own without me realizing it. I'm not the same woman who laughed about you not making it to Christmas. That version of me feels like a stranger. There was no plea at the end. No hint at wanting to rebuild. Just a simple closing. I learned the value of earning my way. I hope that means something to you. Ashley. I read the letter twice, then folded it neatly and placed it in my desk drawer. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was proof that the lesson had taken root. That afternoon, I drove to the shelter. A German Shepherd mix named Charlie had been there for 6 months, too old, too scarred to attract adopters. He followed me from kennel to kennel, leaning his weight into my side whenever I stopped. That day, I finalized his adoption. When I brought him home, he curled up at my feet and let out a deep sigh, like he'd been carrying a weight too. Charlie didn't need apologies or explanations. He didn't measure me against my bank account or my usefulness. He just accepted me. Some relationships can be rebuilt. Others are better left as lessons. Tell me if you got proof someone had truly changed, would you open the door again? Or leave it closed for good? Charlie adjusted to life at my house faster than I expected. By the second week, he knew the sound of my car pulling into the driveway and would be waiting by the door tail, thumping against the wall. Every morning, I'd pour myself a cup of coffee, feed him, and we'd walk the quiet streets together. There was a calm to those mornings that I hadn't felt in years. No phone buzzing with emergencies, no guilt trips disguised as small talk. I still kept Ashley's letter in my desk drawer. Not because I read it often, but because it was proof. Proof that she could stand without leaning on me, and proof that my silence had done more than my words ever could. She had changed, yes, but that didn't mean she belonged back in my life the way she once did. Some people mistake forgiveness for forgetting. I didn't. The day the shelter called to confirm Charlie's adoption paperwork was complete, I stopped by the grocery store where Ashley said she worked. I didn't go inside. I just sat in the parking lot for a while watching the front doors. Eventually, she appeared pushing a cart full of returns back inside, wearing a plain red polo shirt and a name tag. She looked steady. Not happy exactly, but grounded in a way she never was before. She didn't see me, and I didn't make my presence known. That wasn't what this was about. It wasn't about checking on her like she was a project I needed to finish. It was about confirming to myself that she was doing exactly what she claimed in her letter, working, standing on her own, earning her way. That night, Charlie and I sat by the fire. He rested his head on my knee, eyes half closed, perfectly content just to be there. It struck me that the loyalty in those brown eyes was something I'd spent years hoping to see in my own daughter and never did. I thought about Christmas Eve again, about the snow, the warmth of the house I never entered, the laughter on the other side of the door. For a long time, those memories had felt like a wound. Now they felt like the turning point in a story I was glad had happened. Because without that night, I might have spent the rest of my life giving to people who didn't value the gift. 6 months ago, my house had been quiet in a way that felt empty. Now it was quiet in a way that felt peaceful. And the best part, that peace was on my terms. I didn't know if Ashley would ever write again. Maybe she would. Maybe she wouldn't. Either way, the decision to answer if it came would be mine alone. For now, I had Charlie, my mornings, my work at the shelter, and a life I didn't need anyone's approval to enjoy. Tell me, do you think peace is something you find, or something you build the first Christmas after everything felt like standing in a familiar room that had been rearranged in the dark? I recognized the day, the date, the season, but the rhythm was different. There were no plans to make, no drives through icy roads, no bags of expensive gifts carefully chosen for people who would pretend to appreciate them. The silence was mine this year, not given to me out of neglect, but chosen deliberately. Charlie followed me from room to room as I moved through my quiet morning. Outside, a light snow fell, dusting the neighborhood in white. I'd strung my own lights along the gutters a week earlier, simple white strands, not the red and gold display Ashley always insisted on. They glowed softly in the cold, a reminder that traditions can be rebuilt without the people who broke them. Instead of forcing myself into someone else's celebration, I made my own. A simple breakfast, a fire in the hearth, and later a trip to the shelter with a few bags of treats for the dogs who hadn't yet found homes. While I was there, Janet, one of the other volunteers, asked if I had family visiting. I smiled and shook my head. Just me and Charlie this year. There was no sadness in my voice. For the first time in decades, Christmas didn't feel like a test I was doomed to fail. It felt honest. In the afternoon, I walked Charlie through the park. The snow muffled everything, no car engines, no distant music, just the sound of his paws crunching through fresh powder. Halfway down the trail, I realized something. I wasn't looking at my phone. I hadn't checked for messages from Ashley all day, hadn't wondered if she'd call. The absence wasn't painful anymore. When we got home, I brewed a pot of coffee and sat by the fire. That's when I noticed a small package on my doorstep, No return address, just my name written neatly on the top. Inside was a framed photo of me and Ashley from years ago, taken at one of her birthdays. She looked younger, carefree, leaning into me with an easy smile. A sticky note was tucked into the frame, "Merry Christmas, Dad." I'm still learning. I set the frame on my mantel. I didn't call her to say thank you. I didn't write back. It wasn't cruelty, it was clarity. I had learned that acknowledgement didn't always have to mean reopening doors. Charlie laid his head on my foot, and I scratched behind his ear. He didn't care about old photos, past mistakes, or whether I decided to rebuild a relationship. He only cared that I was here now with him. That night, as the fire died down, I realized this was the first Christmas in years I hadn't felt exhausted by the effort of trying to belong in someone else's plans. I belonged exactly where I was. Tell me, would you accept a small gesture from someone who hurt you? Or would you see it as a first step toward something more? It was mid-January when Ashley showed up again. No warning, no call ahead, just the sound of hesitant knocking on my front door. Charlie barked once, then settled by my leg as I opened it. She stood there wrapped in a coat that looked one size too big, her hair pulled back into a loose knot. There was no makeup on her face and no pretense in her eyes. "Hi, Dad," she said softly. "Ashley," my tone was neutral. I didn't step aside right away. I let the moment hang, waiting to see if she'd flinch. She didn't. "I'm not here to ask for money," she continued quickly. "I'm not here to ask for anything, actually. I just wanted to tell you something." I opened the door wider and gestured for her to come in. She sat on the edge of the couch, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. "I've been working 2 jobs," she began. "The grocery store during the day and cleaning offices at night. It's not glamorous, but it's mine. I pay my bills. I even started putting a little into savings." I didn't interrupt. "I wanted you to know," she went on, "that I understand now. Why you stopped helping. Why you didn't answer the calls. It wasn't just about the money, it was about me not valuing anything I had." Her voice caught, but she kept going. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even know if I deserve it. I needed you to hear me say that I get it now. And I'm sorry." I looked at her for a long moment. Her apology felt different this time, less like a key she hoped would unlock something, and more like a confession she needed to give regardless of the outcome. "Do you remember I asked what you told Howard that night on Christmas Eve?" She closed her eyes briefly, the memory washing over her like cold water. "I do, and I hate that I said it. I've thought about it every day since." I nodded slowly. "Good. Because forgetting it would mean forgetting why we're here." She opened her eyes again, meeting mine. "So, where are we?" I leaned back in my chair. "We're in a place where I believe you've learned something. And maybe that's enough for now." She didn't smile, didn't cry. She just nodded as if accepting that the door wasn't shut, but it wasn't wide open either. After a moment, she stood. "Thank you for letting me say it." I walked her to the door. "Take care of yourself, Ashley." When she left, I didn't feel the urge to follow up, to call, or to make promises. I felt still. She had spoken her truth, and I had heard it. That was all this meeting was meant to be. Tell me, if someone showed you they'd changed but didn't ask for anything, would you keep the distance or take a step closer? After Ashley's visit, I noticed something unexpected. There was no heaviness in the air afterward. In the past, any interaction with her had been followed by a residue of second-guessing or regret. This time, there was none. It felt like the conversation had been a closed loop. She'd said what she needed to say, I'd listened, and that was that. The next morning, Charlie and I walked our usual route, the frost crunching under my boots. The neighborhood was quiet, save for the sound of wind moving through bare branches. When we got home, I brewed coffee and sat at the kitchen table with my notebook, the same one where I'd tracked every step of this journey. But now, instead of columns of voicemails, dates, and outcomes, I found myself jotting down plans for my own life. For the first time in years, my goals didn't revolve around managing someone else's crises. I'd been volunteering at the shelter long enough that the staff started hinting about taking on a more official role, coordinating adoptions, managing donations. It wasn't about the title. It was about being part of something that appreciated my time, not just my bank account. That week, I started clearing out my home office. Not because I planned to move, but because I wanted to strip away the clutter of a life that had been half-lived for too long. Old files, outdated business awards, correspondence I'd kept out of habit. They all went into boxes, bound for the attic. What stayed behind were the things that still mattered: my books, a few framed photos, and the small wooden carving my father had given me before I left for college. One afternoon, while sorting through a stack of mail, I came across a letter from the Great Lakes Animal Welfare Foundation. They wanted to thank me for my continued support and invited me to a donor luncheon in the spring. A year ago, I might have sent a check and ignored the invitation. This time, I marked the date in my calendar. The more I leaned into this new life, the less I thought about the old one. I still saw Ashley's framed photo on the mantel, but it no longer pulled at me like it once did. It was simply a reminder of what was lost, what was taught, and what was learned. One evening, as Charlie slept by the fire, I realized something. I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for an apology, not for reconciliation, not for some version of the past to return. I was living in the present, and it was mine alone. Peace doesn't arrive with a grand gesture. It builds slowly, choice by choice, until one day you look around and realize you've been living it for a while without noticing. Tell me, when you finally take your life back, do you look for the old pieces or start fresh? Charlie had been with me for a few months now, and in that time I'd learned more about loyalty than I had in decades of human relationships. He didn't care about my net worth, the size of my house, or whether I could pull strings to make his life easier. He cared that I fed him, walked him, and kept him safe. It was as simple and as pure as that. One Saturday morning, I took him to the shelter's adoption event at the local park. The wind was brisk, but the sun was bright, and Charlie trotted beside me like he owned the place. A few people asked if he was available for adoption, and I couldn't help but smile when I said no. He's already found his home. As the day went on, I helped set up tables, greet visitors, and match dogs with potential families. Somewhere in the middle of it all, I realized how different I felt now compared to a year ago. Back then, I was pouring my time, money, and energy into people who only saw me as a resource. Now I was investing in something that gave back in ways money couldn't measure. That evening, back home, Charlie curled up on the couch beside me as I went through the mail. Most of it was junk credit card offers, flyers, but one envelope stood out. It was from Ashley. Inside was a short note and a small Polaroid photo of her, standing outside a modest apartment building. She was smiling, not the polished smile I remembered from her perfect life, but a tired, genuine smile. The note read, "Dad, this is my new place. Paid the deposit myself. Feels good to have something that's mine. Hope you're well. A." I set the photo on the coffee table and leaned back. It wasn't a request. It wasn't a manipulation. Just a fact she wanted me to know. A year ago, I might have taken it as an opening, a reason to reopen the door wider. Now I saw it for what it was: progress on her part, closure on mine. Charlie nudged my hand, and I scratched behind his ears. He sighed and rested his head on my knee, his eyes closing in perfect trust. That's the thing about dogs. They don't ask for more than you can give, and they never make you feel like you're not enough. Looking at him, I thought about how different my life was now. The drama was gone, replaced with simple routines and quiet satisfaction. I didn't need grand apologies or elaborate reconciliations. I didn't need to be pulled back into old patterns just because someone else had changed. Sometimes the best thing you can do for them and for yourself is to let the distance stay. Tell me, do you believe loyalty is something earned once or something that must be proven over and over? Spring crept in, slowly trading snowbanks for muddy patches of grass. Charlie and I settled into a rhythm. Morning walks, afternoons at the shelter, evenings by the fire. Life wasn't loud anymore, but it was steady, and I had no interest in shaking that balance. One afternoon, I received another letter from the Great Lakes Animal Welfare Foundation. Inside was a simple thank you for my continued contributions and an update on the projects my donations had helped fund, expanded kennels' new medical equipment, and a transport van for rescue missions. I read it twice, feeling something I hadn't felt in years, the satisfaction of seeing my resources do real, tangible good. It struck me that this quietly making a difference without having to beg someone to appreciate it was the life I'd been searching for all along. Ashley's name still appeared in my thoughts from time to time, but it no longer brought the tightness in my chest it once did. Her last note, the photo of her in front of her new apartment, was still on my coffee table. I hadn't moved it, not because I was holding on to hope, but because it was a reminder that change, real change, was possible, even for someone who had once laughed about me not making it to Christmas. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the last light stretched across my living room, I thought about the man I'd been a year ago. Back then, my worth was tangled up in being needed. I measured my value by how much I could give, how many problems I could solve. Now I measured it by something much simpler, my own peace. I realized the real victory wasn't in watching Ashley struggle or even in seeing her grow. It was in reclaiming my freedom to choose where my time, energy, and money went. For the first time in years, I wasn't obligated to anyone who saw me as a means to an end. Charlie stirred at my feet, stretching before curling up again. His quiet presence reminded me of the one thing I'd learned above all else: relationships, human or otherwise, should never feel like chains. That night, I stepped outside, breathing in the cool spring air. The stars were just beginning to prick the sky, and for a moment I felt something I hadn't in a long time: light. Untethered. The final measure of freedom. I didn't know if Ashley and I would ever share another holiday or even another meal, but I did know this: if that day ever came, it would be on equal footing. Not because she needed saving, but because she had learned how to stand on her own. And if it never came, that was fine too. I wasn't waiting anymore. Tell me, when you finally set yourself free from someone's hold, do you keep the door cracked or close it for good? Some wounds don't heal because someone says "I'm sorry." They heal when you take back control of your own life. I learned that peace isn't something others can hand you. It's something you build choice by choice, even if it means walking away from people you once loved. If you're a parent giving endlessly without respect in return, ask yourself, are you helping or are you enabling? Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is step back and let them grow. Have you ever lived through something like my story? How did you handle it? And what did you learn? If this meant something to you, subscribe and share. Thank you for listening.